Hey there. Happy Monday to you, and hope it's treating you well so far. I'm Della Rucker. I am the principal of the Wise Economy Workshop, which is a platform for thinking and doing around creating the future of our communities. I'm also the author of this book and a few others. The Local Economy Revolution, What Has Arrived? The Local Economy Revolution has arrived. We'll say the name of the book right. What's changed and how you can help. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. It has been a little exciting over here for the last few weeks. We've actually been able to crank out some things that have been in the process for a while. So some of you may be aware that there's a new short shot, and it is based on this book. It is actually taking the first principles section, which I've been reading through on these broadcasts, and it pulls it out into a separate document with good design and good pictures and all of that stuff that you don't necessarily get in the book, which has a lot of pages. And it pulls it out into a nice, simple, easy to use, easy to share format. So if you'd like to get a taste of what the Local Economy Revolution is about and why it's necessary in your community, go to wiseeconomy.com and look for the most recent blog post, which has a link to a computer-friendly version of that first principles short shot. So it's about a 20-page document, and I think you'll find it interesting and useful and hopefully thought-provoking. And if you like that, then you may also enjoy picking up the full book, The Local Economy Revolution Has Arrived, which you can order from any place where you get your books, and especially available in multiple digital and physical formats at Gumroad.com, Lulu.com, and on Amazon. So in case you want some options in addition to our friends at Amazon. So getting that short shot out felt great to me, felt very exciting. A few other things have been going on. I've gotten comfortable enough with doing these videos that I decided that it was time to start posting them to LinkedIn. So if you are watching this on Google or on Facebook or on Twitter, it's also available now on LinkedIn. So just look for my LinkedIn profile. There's not a whole lot of Dellas out there, so I think you could figure this one out. So those will be on there. They're not always on there immediately because I want to make sure they're a good one before I put them on there. I'm a little more willing to experiment with the other channels, but you can find those there as well. I talked about the book a minute ago. One other thing that you might find useful is I put out a weekly digest. And so this is called the Wiseful Digest. Wiseful is the name of the Wise Economy Workshop's printing platform, where the publications live, books, short shots, etc. And some people go, well, what the heck is that supposed to mean, a wise fool? Well, I think one of the things that we discover when we've worked in this space for a while, and if we're honest with ourselves, is that the more we know, sometimes the less we feel like we actually know. So the Wiseful idea is sort of a play on that. The So the Wiseful Digest is a weekly that goes out to my Substack subscribers. It has 3 or 4 articles on current events, things that are unfolding somewhere in the country or somewhere in the world that illustrate or point to where this new economy is taking us, particularly things that will impact the local level, and gives a little bit of an analysis on that. And then sometimes there's some other benefits that are thrown in there as well. We're also working on launching very soon a journal, which will be a quarterly journal, and a salon series. So that'll be a conversation series. So I'm currently doing an occasional video series called Accelerate Us, Dispatches from the Front Lines of the Local Economy Revolution. And you can find that on this same YouTube channel. You can And you can also find that in podcast form, audio podcast form, on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. At any rate, the point of bringing that up is that the newest digest is going to be coming out very soon, and digest subscribers will also get special access to that salon style discussion that'll be announced very soon. So it's a nice, easy, inexpensive way to get a unique set of insight and experience and information on how this local economy revolution is unfolding nationwide. And I think there's a lot of information in there that you can use both for yourself and for the places that you care about. So that's what all's coming up. So over the last week or couple, 3 weeks, it's really probably been more like a month, I've been reading from The Local Economy Revolution Has Arrived to introduce you to those first principles that I mentioned a minute ago. So why? So from my perspective, and it's ironic because it was written, that part was actually written more recently than a lot of the book's content. The first principles are really about the foundational elements. If we're going to make a very profound shift, which I'm going to argue today that we have to, in how we manage, how we take care of, how we advocate for the communities and the places that we care about, we have to be very, very clear on what our new fundamentals, what our new beliefs, what our new foundational elements really are. Because if we're not, and we're just doing stuff, one of the things that I learned kind of the hard way over the past few years is that if we're not really, really conscious about where we're going and what we're trying to do and what that new direction is, we incredibly easily fall back into our old habits, our old traditions, our old expectations, our old ways of doing things. And we may not even realize that we're doing it. That's the astonishing part, is that sometimes we say we want to change, we say we want to do things differently, but because we are such creatures of habit, when push comes to shove, we revert back to the way we've done things previously. And as I'm going to argue today, we can't afford to do that if we actually care about the places and the people of our communities. And when I talk about places, I'm really talking about places as a conduit, as a setting for people. So the people are the core, all of these, but sometimes I say places to sort of shorthand and so that I don't have to say communities like 300 times. So that's why those first principles are so important. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about those, as I mentioned, there's a free publication that's available on the Wise Economy site. Go to wiseeconomy.com, find the most recent blog post, and you'll have a free download of these first principles. I've also been reading from them and sort of talking about them here over the last 3 months or so. So if you go to this video source and you look back at the archive, you can find those conversations as well. So starting today, I want to kind of get a little deeper. So I've introduced these concepts, these first principles, and I want to take the opportunity of these live streams to dig a little bit deeper into what they actually mean. And I'm going to start with the biggest one, because this is arguably, in fact, in the book, it has its own category. So there's 3 categories of these first principles. And the first one just has one thing in it, and it's called the driving force. And the driving force is that we are moving into a new economic era. We're moving into something that I've called the fusion era or the fusion economy. And other people have used that term too. And because of that move, because that is the shift that the world around us is undergoing, that has very profound ramifications for not just the big stuff like artificial intelligence and these things that can feel very abstract to us, but they have very immediate germane impacts on the way we live and work and care for the communities and the places and the people that matter to us the most. So it's a much more profound change than we often give it credit for being. I call it the fusion economy. Some people call it the fourth industrial revolution. There's other terms that are bandied around. 20 years from now, 40 years from now, maybe we'll have a set term. For now, I'm using fusion economy because it gets at some of the unusual elements here, the elements here that we're not used to, coming from the industrial era mindset that every single one of us has grown up in to some extent or another. So when I talk about the fusion economy or the fusion era, that's what I'm going at. So I have written about the fusion era more than once. I wrote about it in The Local Economy Revolution Has Arrived. I wrote about it in Everybody Innovates Here, which was a book I put out in 2018 that is focused on how to foster inclusive innovation in communities. But I've always had a little bit of trouble articulating what the fundamentals of that change are from the perspective of people who work in and care about local communities. But I think I've hit on it. So I've at least got some, and I'm going to share those with you today. So, drum roll. I can't do the drum roll thing. I can't do it physically. I never could, even when I was a percussionist as a kid. And I can't do that thing. Little extra knowledge for today. 5 principles of this fusion era. One is the move from predictability to uncertainty. When we did plans or programs in the past, we could be fairly certain that if we projected a certain kind of population growth, that was probably what was going to happen in the foreseeable future. If we projected a certain kind of use of technology, we're using this technology now, we can be pretty sure that we're going to do something similar to that in the near future. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that a lot of those assumptions are out the window at this point. And that puts us in a situation of massive uncertainty about things as basic as, is our population going to increase or decrease over the course of the next 10 years? And I think we've all seen with sort of we have a sense at this point of how things like migration have changed during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we honestly don't know what's going to happen coming out of it. Are migration patterns going to kind of go back to where they were pre-COVID, or are we seeing now a complete change in how people live? We don't know. So unpredictability is a core characteristic of this fusion economy. We got used over the course of the 20th century to having very mediated communication. This is the second one. We have a situation where, when I was growing up, and I'm older than some of you, you got your news from a respected journalist on a national network, right? Now I get my news from 20 or 30 sources, some of which may be a whole lot more reliable than others. My access to information is not being mediated by those traditional information bearers the way it used to be. And that's true for communities and governments too. We've lost a lot of local newspapers that sort of provided that mediation. We've also gained hundreds of voices that we wouldn't have perhaps been able to hear 23 years ago. back when I was a reporter for a local newspaper in the 80s. So that unmediated access to information means that, well, I'll get into implications in a minute. So unpredictable, unmediated. The third thing is that we've had a very profound shift from a world in which we expect hierarchies, whether it's at work, in our political context, in our social context. We expect there to be a hierarchy. We expect there to be a pecking order. That's very much an industrial era leftover. And you see this all throughout, especially local governments and local organizations, where there's very much an expectation that the department head or the executive director has a different responsibility, has a different level of importance than the other people in the food chain. In fact, we use terms like food chain, pecking order. Those are all indications of a hierarchy. And increasingly, two things happen. One is that hierarchies prove incapable of being flexible enough. And number two is that people who have not been raised in a hierarchical point of view, meaning that they're more aligned with this fusion economy, they don't get the hierarchy thing. And they don't want to, they don't choose to live in that manner. And that's not just our employees, that's the people of our communities as well. The fourth of these elements of this fusion era is that we used to be very comfortable with having specializations and staying within our specialization. So if I'm an economic developer, my responsibility for anything else in the community begins and ends within the range of what my economic development organization does. Housing, workforce, education, all these were not part of my equation. But increasingly, and if you're in economic development as a professional, you're going, okay, that was then, that is not now. Precisely. We understand now more clearly than ever how interdependent the various elements of our community are. That doesn't mean that we necessarily know what to do with that knowledge yet, but I'll get there in a minute. The fifth element is a very, very basic one, but perhaps the most profound shift of all. In the industrial era, in the industrial economy, we were reliant on people to provide labor. So my father and my grandfather, as many of you know, had a very small paint factory. The machinery that made the paint was run by people who knew how to run that machinery. The labor, the physical labor, and the know-how of the process of making the paint was the most critical element to the success of the business after being able to get raw materials, the chemicals and the pigments and the like. Today, we need the people less for the administration of the process. We need the people enormously less for the administration of the process. But what we increasingly need is the people who have the creativity and the insight and the mind capability to create new solutions, to figure out how to solve problems in a larger context. When the guys at the paint factory back in the 70s, when they had a problem with a shipment or they had a problem with a batch of paint, it wasn't necessarily their job to troubleshoot it. It was my father's job as the vice president to be the one to figure out what went wrong, so they could hand that responsibility off. And increasingly, whether it's in a business context or a bigger context like a community, we can't do that anymore. So I gave you 5 principles. I'm going to give you 5 implications, 5 outcomes or results or logical conclusions to draw from those 5 principles. One is that we have to take a new stance. We need to, as a strategic planning specialist I have worked with, identified, move into flexible delivery in service of a set and clear vision. And flexible delivery, let alone clear vision, those aren't things that we're necessarily very good at intrinsically, because we've come up in this industrial era context where just making it go was the most important thing. Now making it go is not necessarily the most important thing, because you could charge down the rails in completely the wrong direction with incredible ease. So knowing what the vision for the community is, or for the organization, or for the business, and then being flexible and maintaining flexibility in terms of how you get to it, that's the crucial component. So new stance. Another is new approach to control. We can't control information, and as a result of that, we don't have the choice of not being honest. Even if we're in local government, which is notoriously not always transparent and certainly not always honest, we don't have a choice anymore. We have to be honest. We have to be as transparent as we could possibly manage to be. And for a very practical reason. If we don't, it's going to come back and bite us. And I don't care whether you're a nonprofit, you're just a regular Joe in the community, or you're a city manager. Those are all necessities created by this unmediated information environment. You have to be able to tell your own story and your own story clearly and honestly. And we have plenty of examples from both government and business as to how badly things go when we get that transparency wrong. So new stance, new control systems, new ways of working. So we talked about hierarchy, and there's been lots of work in the business sector. If you talk to, large businesses, smaller businesses, you see an incredible change in the last 20 years in many contexts as to how organizations are structured. And to different levels, they do a better or a worse job of eliminating the barriers that hierarchy creates. In the community space, we can still be really lousy at that. In local government and in community organizations, we can be incredibly lousy at creating that kind of network leverage. Because we say, this is mine. Oh, I can't share. I can't work with you because this pot of money, we got this grant, and this grant says that we have to do this, and it doesn't say that we can share with you. And blah, blah, blah. That's what keeps us from succeeding, and keeps us from being able to make real impact. In terms of the skills that we build within ourselves and our organizations, we've had a tendency to want to be very specialized. And instead of specialization, which increasingly locks us into a silo that may not be useful, we have to be able to spread. So it's okay to have some deep level of expertise, but we have to be able to spread across and understand and interact with humility and transparency, with systems, approaches, areas of the community, areas of expertise that we wouldn't have touched before. It would have been like, oh yeah, that's over there. That's somebody else's problem. And finally, and I think this is the most powerful thing, is that is one of the other first principles in the local economy revolution has arrived, says that Inclusion is not just a moral good, it is an economic necessity. Right now, we talk all the time about innovation. Oh, we need innovation. Let's have more innovation. We should have more innovation. Innovation words. We build big buildings and fancy stuff to get innovation. But increasingly, the pool of people that we are trying to get that innovation from is more narrow and more narrow and more narrow. To the point where, in a lot of cases, we're not getting innovation. We're getting variation on a theme. So we've taken a thing that we know, and instead of creating something new, we've just kind of come off in a little bit of a different direction. As I say over and over again, in the local economy revolution has arrived, we've got thousands of innovators. We've got unbelievable potential to create new things, new ideas, new social services, new ways of engaging people, new products, you name it. But innovation and innovative capability does not only live with people who have advanced degrees or fancy programs or fancy equipment or people who have my skin color. Innovation, and especially the kind of innovation that we need most, is most likely to come from the people who don't look like me. Innovation of the kind that we need most is not likely to come from the people who have already been trained up in a particular area of technology or a particular specialization. They may be a very important part of that process. But innovation on the scale and to the depth that the moment now and this fusion economy requires of us is far more than variations on a theme. We need profound, paradigm-breaking, shock the world sort of insights. And we have enormous wasted potential in people who are to date cut out of that innovation process. And that's not just a tech thing. We need innovation because of this very profound change. The biggest one that we've seen in humanity in 200, 300 years. We need all hands on deck. We need to unlock the creative and empathetic and paradigm-breaking potential of all the people in our communities. And it can't be a rich person's playground or an elite person's playground. It can't be something that's only open to a special few. And we can do that. We just have to have the willpower to do it. So that's what I got for you today. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for listening. Again, if you enjoy this, if you want to continue to pursue these ideas, I'd recommend that you pick up that short shot that's available at wiseeconomy.com. That site will also give you a little better picture. It needs a little updating, but it'll give you a better picture of what the whole Wise Economy platform is about. You can also get this book, The Local Economy Revolution Has Arrived, anywhere you get your books. And if you really want to be looking at how all this is unfolding on the ground in the world today, in the places that your media sources might not be telling you about, then join me at the wiseeconomy.substack.com to get a good weekly dose, and occasionally more than weekly dose, of how this fusion economy is unfolding and impacting our world and our communities and the places that we care about. So thank you so much for taking the time. And as I always tell you, we have never had a better opportunity. And so now is the time to go get them. Thanks.